I'll be completely honest. It took me 2 weeks to finish this speech. After all, the point was to prove what sets us apart from our peers, and I am just one of millions of average teenagers. I go to school, balance a social life, and run late nights off a candy stash in the bottom of my backpack. But I also don't need an entire essay to prove that I am separate, to set myself apart. After all, I'm likely the only one here who can claim a nearly expired Twinkie changed her life. Last fall, our local grocery store was trying to rid itself of its slowly dying hostess treats, especially the Twinkies. I didn't know this, nor did I care, until a beloved neighbor texted me out of the blue. Her message read along the lines of, "Look how many of these are on sale. Isn't that fun?" After a few moments, her texts continued, asking if my family and I wanted any. I hesitated briefly before responding. I didn't want to bother my neighbor for snacks, but truth be told, they looked delicious. Attempting a middle ground, I went with the response, "I've actually never had Twinkies." My neighbor never texted me back. The next day, I walked into the kitchen to an expected sight, my father making dinner, and an unexpected sight, my neighbor carrying a grocery bag full of hostess treats. I caught one line of their conversation before I was swept into it as well. "I'm culturally educating your kids, Mervyn." My dad laughed awkwardly. I joined the group and we thanked our neighbor for the snacks before she headed off on the rest of her walk. But when my father drove me to sports that afternoon, he mentioned our neighbor's comment. Again. "Culturally educating my kids," he scoffed. "I educate you plenty." Maybe the comment would have hit differently, or maybe I wouldn't have even thought of it again if it weren't for three things. My father is Filipino. My neighbor is white. And especially at that moment, I felt like some amorphous racial blob in the middle. This wasn't the first time I'd felt that way. Really, when it comes down to it, I am an amorphous little blob of race. As I said, my father is Filipino and grew up in Vallejo, California. On the other hand, my mother is white, her father was Irish, and grew up a 5-minute walk from where I currently live. And ever since I was little, this left me doing the math. This meant that I was half Filipino, a quarter Irish, and a quarter white, whatever that meant. This was good enough of an explanation for me when I was little. After all, I was far more focused on becoming the world's first dental astronaut than the concept of race. But come 3rd grade, I became aware of my differences. And like so many things when you're that young, the signs had been there the whole time. It was just one moment that snapped them into place. And for me, that moment was being singled out as black on Martin Luther King Day. Again, this was 3rd grade, so the fact that Martin Luther King Day was coming up didn't seem like that big of a deal. The day had been rainy, we'd been stuck in the classroom all day, and we had very little self-control. A brutal combination for all involved. When our teacher sat us down, I remember being more focused on throwing paper at my desk mate than whatever we were supposed to be learning. Lost in my world of crumpled worksheet projectiles, I knew I was in trouble the moment I heard my name. Whipping around, I caught a statement that would change me forever. "So kids like Eleanor wouldn't be able to go to school with us. Their skin is darker, so they'd be too black to do anything with us." The carrier of the statement looked around the classroom before finishing with something like, "It wasn't fair, but it's just because they're different. Now it's all fair." But I didn't suddenly feel blessed with fairness. I felt stuck. Martin Luther King was black, my classmates were all white, and I had been wedged into a spectrum that seemed too small for me. I felt separated, objectified, different, and I couldn't figure out why. I knew then that I wasn't white. I had a more tan complexion than most of my peers. Dad made foods like lumpia and tempura, foods that my classmates hadn't even heard of. But that still didn't make me feel any different before now. I grew up in the same place as all of them. I had the same experiences of culture, of friendship, of growing up in the middle of nowhere. I grew up, truly, the same as all of them. Except now, I was just different, and not in the ways I had been before. It's hard to describe that feeling, and I don't think I even noticed it then. But I kept moving up the ladder that is a rural public school. I gained incidents under my belt that further split me apart. One time, a classmate told me to stop being so Asian when I contributed my findings to a group project. I was, and still am, constantly confused with the other Asian girls in my school. "Are you and so-and-so siblings?" one person will ask, while another will slip and call me the name of any remotely Asian student. Even as I prepared this speech, the person I was talking to mentioned a story just like mine. After some digging, two things were incredibly clear. First, my autobiographical doppelganger was Chinese, not Filipino. And secondly, his story was about staying true to his culture while navigating a white world. I wish I could have had that to lean on as I moved into high school post-COVID. My sense of culture seemed unclear, fluctuating, not strong enough to describe me as truly Asian, but it overwhelmed others' interpretations of a white kid. High school is already a difficult time, and it seemed like a stupid struggle to be having. I reminded myself that no one truly saw me, that no one noticed I stood out, and that it was stupid to govern myself based on something as shallow as someone else's opinion. It didn't work. For no explainable reason, I felt like I was cracking under the weight of something as simple as spending 6 hours a day in a dying building. But I was also growing. Even as I applied to schools out of state, desperately seeking an escape route, I started to become different in more ways than just my weird, not a racial difference. I found friends. I learned, shockingly, that teachers could be wrong, and I could stand up to them when I thought something needed to change. I joined STAG, a group that was essentially planning the new advisory class for the next year. I ended up with a crush, which was terrifying for a girl who previously swore she would live alone in the woods, that was made more complicated by the fact that said crush was a girl, and that gave me a whole new layer of different sexuality. Little things that made me different layered on top of each other, piling and compressing one another. And it was one moment that taught me how to see that. My neighbor dropping off a plastic bag of Twinkies and culturally educating me. I learned so much that day. First, the superficial. Twinkies suck. But what I also learned was so much more important. Being this weird Asian, not Asian, biracial hybrid wasn't something I could hide or think through or solve. It was always going to be something people saw. That said, it was also being smashed into all of the other things piling up on top of it. And those feelings of difference weren't going to go away. They were what set me apart. That was that fleeting thing that adults called an identity. No, it didn't actually hit all at once like that. I wish it did. That would have made things so much easier. Like everything before it, the realization snuck up on me. When something hovers over you as a feeling for so long, it's hard to concentrate it into words. And my struggle with this difference, I discovered, wasn't wrong or separating. It was something everyone goes through at one point or another. I was simply in a position where something as simple as my skin, my cheekbones, the shape of my eyes set me apart before I was ready to accept it. It's not a unique struggle, but it's one that's hard to find resources for, especially where I live, and especially as a younger child. But I did it. I accepted those weird, wobbly differences. Am I confident in where I sit in my family culture? No, not yet. But I don't need to be right now, and I don't need to be half Filipino, a quarter Irish, a quarter white, 24/7. Really, I'd rather spend my time on how those differences have made me more of my own person. I openly have a girlfriend, I take pride in my sport, and I keep in touch with the head of the STAG board, and I've started taking new opportunities that have led me places like here. I still don't feel like I deserve to write this speech. Am I too uncultured? Too white? And I don't know what I'm doing, still. But I won't ever have a clear path, and my life isn't something to be halved and quartered into rationality. For now, I'll just focus on being Eleanor. Not so-and-so's sister, and not the girl who fills a diversity quota. Just Eleanor, who still doesn't like Twinkies.